to October's meeting of the Planning Applications Committee. Three planning items on the agenda, which, just to let you know, I'm going to take in reverse order. Number 7, which is known as the Eddie Katz site. Then number 6, Russell Road, SW19. And then number 5, Hayford Avenue. But first on the agenda, number 1, apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Dean and Councillor Quilliam, who are being replaced by, respectively, Councillors Natif and Councillor Dehaney. Everyone else is here, so there's no other apologies for absence. Declarations of pecuniary interest. I'm not seeing any, no. Number 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Are they agreed as an accurate record of that meeting? Agreed, thank you. Item 4 is the town planning applications. I'll briefly, for members of the public and anyone listening at home, run down how we deal with these. First off, the officer responsible for the report in front of you will give a presentation. After that, we then have speakers in favour. For the first 2 applications, we have 2, speakers on the application. For the first 2, we have 2 objectors who will be allowed to speak for 3 minutes each. And then the agent or applicant in response gets the same amount of time, so that's a total of 6 minutes to reply. We then have any contributions there are from councillors who represent the wards in which the developments are proposed. Then we go back to the officer to comment on any points which were raised in those contributions. Then we go to questions. From that point onwards, then only councillors who are members of the committee can take part. We go to questions from councillors and then comments in a debate, and then we move to a vote to decide. The 3 options in front of us are to approve the officer's recommendation, to reject that recommendation, or to defer until the next meeting or a later meeting. Those are the 3 options which we may come to vote on. And so that's how it will work. We'll go through the 3 items, as I said, in reverse order, 7, 6 and 5. So number 7 is the former Eddie Katz site on Station Road in Colliers Wood. And is it Jonathan you're presenting on this?
Lee will present now. I'll share the screen with the images.
Okay, Lee will be presenting on this, and for those at home and those here on the big screens, there will be drawings and other pictures on the presentation. So Lee, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. There are drawings for this that are on the members' packs, but we're going to show some photographs of the site. The applicants have provided a model down here to show what this would look like as close to reality as we could. So the application is demolition of the existing building and the redevelopment of the site with 2 mixed height towers of residential and commercial space, a new footbridge across the Wandle, and associated hard and soft landscaping. The existing building occupies a double-storey warehouse building. It was formerly the Eddie Katz Children's Soft Play Area and currently used for a charitable base for cycle repairs on part-time. On the model, the front tower, which is the lighter building, is to the south of the site, and that's designated to provide 46 affordable housing units. And it would be 7 stories closest to Moranton Way, which is the south side, rising to 10 stories towards the centre. The accommodation would be 16 1-bedroom units, 23 2-bed and 7 3-bed. The rear darker tower is intended for 70 market housing units. That will be 13 stories in the centre of the site, dropping to 9 to the north. So the 2 highest elements of the development towards the centre of the site. The accommodation for that one is 15 studio units, 23 1-bed, 28 2-bed and 4 3-bed units. Both towers are fire safety and safety by design compliant. Total provision will be 116 units, of which 44% by habitable room will be affordable, with 53% intermediate and 47% affordable rent by habitable room. All units meet the required internal space standards and amenity balcony sizes. Both blocks will be finished in predominantly exposed brickwork in contrasting shades of buff and red-brown brick, as can be seen on the drawing, with some sawtooth and hit and miss panels on the ground floor to enliven the frontages. Balconies are going to be a mixture of protruding and recessed units. There'll be 456 square meters of commercial space over the ground and first floor levels of the south block and the ground floor in the north block. The ground floors of both blocks are largely going to accommodate the secure cycle storage, plant rooms, and the refuge bins. The refuge will be brought out on collection day to a designated on-site space. The site's going to be permit free, so no parking in the surrounding streets, but it provides 3 wheelchair accessible bays and 2 car club bays, all with electric charging facilities. The new pedestrian footbridge will provide access from the junction of Mill Road and Dame Road onto the sites, can be seen on the drawing. The 34 trees on the site, 11 of them will be removed. Mostly of those are to the Sainsbury's side of the site because they're either low quality or diseased, but 21 new trees will be planted, mostly on the east of the site, a couple between the 2 buildings and another 6 along the riverfront. Which I just covered, yes. The works to the riverbank would remove the invasive species and replant native ones with a 70% net gain of biodiversity and a policy compliant urban greening factor. The associated landscaping would improve access to the riverbank as part of over 2,000 square meters of public realm, including 2 play areas, 1 between the 2 blocks and 1 just between the north block and the river. The design achieves a 90% carbon reduction for the residential element, 56% on the commercial. Development with all electric and would utilize air source heat pumps and PV paneling. And you can see the PV that would be provided on the roof there. Any remaining would be met by an offset contribution of carbon secured through Section 106. Closest residential properties to the west of the site on Mill Road and Dame Road, the closest being 21.7 meters, and that's at the lower end of the north block. Properties being separated by the site from some mature trees on the west bank of the river. Site constraints, it's in a designated opportunity area. Site's located in archaeological priorities area. That includes a small area of the outline of the Scheduled Ancient Monument of Merton Abbey. South London high pressure water ring main runs to the southeast, and the two towers and the riverbank runs north-south of the west of the site. It's designated a green corridor and forms part of the Wandle Valley Conservation Area. Directly to the south of the site and the opposite site, Moranton Way, is the Merton Abbey Mills site, which includes a number of statutory and locally listed buildings. The recommendation is that members grant planning permission subject to any direction from the mayor, as this is a referable case to the mayor, subject to a Section 106 agreement and conditions, the Section 106 agreement to be permit-free development, contribution to the off-site car club bays, carbon off-site contribution, public realm improvements, including the bridge maintenance, affordable housing provision, monitoring a travel plan, and a B-scene energy monitoring. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We move now straight on to 2 speeches from objectors. I'm going to take them in the order that they're on my sheet. So the first one is Tim Berkey. Can you let me know if you're in the room or on Zoom, I was going to say, but in the room. You should be able to turn your microphone on with the button in front of you, and a red light will light up. There you go. Go ahead, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Tim Berkey. I'm a resident in Station Road. I represent a residents association for the 19 houses in Station Road. Some of the residents are here tonight. 6 send their apologies. They couldn't attend in the short notice. But I've been given their approval to speak on their behalf. First point is the current proposals are considered by residents nearby in Mill Road, Dane Road, Meadow Road, Croft Road and Station Roads to be too high and too dense as submitted for approval. The 2 blocks proposed are 13 and 10 storey. I noticed tonight that there's air source heat pumps on top, so that'll add a storey on each, as well as potential noise problems. These 2 towers will overshadow and loom over the residential area next to it, as well as close off views of the sky to the east of it. The application should be rejected and any future proposals be reviewed to lower the proposed accommodation below the tree line and reflect the scale of Merton Abbey Mills and the Abbey Wall development now underway. Abbey Wall's development, I think the maximum at that end is going to be 4 or 5 stories, facing onto Moranton Way. The second point is the current proposals make no attempt to avoid adding a huge volume of added daily traffic of visitor, service and delivery traffic along Station Road. This is an existing 6 metre wide one-way street and has a three-point turning area at the end, which we noticed from the model tonight has been adopted by the proposed development. So that will prevent people turning there. This will add on to the extra traffic that is already going to be generated by the approved 64 flats being built in Station Road at the current time. All of these flats, the 116 in the new proposal and the 64 on Abbey Wall, will generate delivery traffic. They'll deliver, there'll also be Uber traffic. There'll be all this additional daily traffic, which is in an already congested road. The third point is the current proposals fail to allow easy access to fire and emergency services. When Thames Water did work on that site last year, they were able to create a link onto the Sainsbury's Access Road, and that link is still there. This proposal makes no attempt to make a link there, and instead we'll be trying to send emergency vehicles down Station Road with its residence parking, etc. And it'll just basically cause more problems at the link with Abbey Road High Path at the end. Also, the current proposals destroy an existing green corridor along the Wandle between Station Road and Mill Road. There's a large variety of visiting wildlife, herons, wagtails, bats, butterflies, who rely on that vegetation on the bank. Clearing this away will basically send them elsewhere. And it's all being done so there can be some coffee shops that you know, for a sort of...
Okay, I'm sorry, the 3 minutes is up, but thank you very much for that. I should have pointed out at the start, we have the light system here. It's green when you start. It changes to amber when there's a minute to go, and will change to red when your 3 minutes is complete. The next speaker we have is Emma Claire Hanley. That's you. Are you able to put your microphone on? Perfect. Thank you very much. And you have the 3 minutes. It will turn amber when you've got 1 minute to go.
Okay. The proposed redevelopment contradicts the principles set down in the council's own tall buildings background paper, policy CS14, adopted core planning strategy, policies DMD2 and DMD4 of adopted sites and policies plan. The proposal would dominate the area in bulk, scale and design. It would be clearly visible from the public realm, significantly changing the skyline. It would adversely harm this quiet residential area of 2-storey Edwardian terrace cottages and conservation areas of Merton Abbey Mills, the Wandle Trail and Merton Priory. Due to the height and very close proximity of the proposal, this would lead to loss of light and overshadowing the homes in Mill Road, where I live. The daylight sunlight and overshadowing report states that this loss and overshadowing will be unreasonable. Our homes will be completely overlooked due to the design and height and the use of overhanging balconies, leading to complete loss of privacy in our homes and gardens in Mill Road. The size and density, 116 residential units plus commercial units below, would create significant noise and odour, destroying the quiet character of our area, and the unnecessary proposed bridge over the River Wandle at the corner of Mill and Dane Roads would dramatically increase foot and cycle traffic into Mill Road. This would be dangerous to pedestrians and would increase antisocial behaviour in Mill Road and the Wandle Trail. Although proposed to be a car-free development, this assumption is somewhat naive. This will encourage residents of the towers to do as the bus drivers from Merton Garage do and park on the roads outside the hours of the CPZ. The development would be destructive to the natural riverbank environment and the enjoyment of the Wandle Trail. There does not appear to be any emergency vehicle access to the properties. This is very concerning, bearing in mind the height of these 2 towers of 10 and 13 stories and their proximity to the homes of Mill Road. I would urge you to reject most strongly this development. It is most unsuitable to the site that it is on, which is a small site and not suited close on the riverbank.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Emma Claire. The next speaker I have down is Stephen Russell. Are you in the room? Is that you? Excellent. If you take your microphone on, you get 6 minutes. Certainly, we have the 6 minutes between you and the light will go red when that's used up. You can use it between you as you wish.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. It's my pleasure to be presenting Hadley Property Group's Station Road development to you all this evening. We've been working very closely on our designs with your officers, as well as statutory bodies such as the Environmental Agency, Thames Water, and the London Fire Brigade. We've consulted openly and thoroughly with surrounding residents, councillors, your own design review panel, and over 30 local community groups. Despite the pandemic, we've held 2 public consultation events and received over 3,000 pieces of feedback. Also included in that is 43 letters of support from our neighbours, including the Colour House Theatre at Merton Abbey Mills. I'd like to point out that we have listened to the feedback. The toilet element of the scheme was reduced in height from 15 to 13 stories. The original single block design was divided into 2 plots at the request of the design review panel. And at the request of officers, further land holdings were acquired from Sainsbury's Estates at additional cost, which increased the public realm to 2,000 square metres. Our designs are inclusive and completely tenure blind, and we're delighted that our proposals have received a recommendation from both Merton and the GLA's planning officers. Collieswood Town Centre and this specific site within it are identified in the Merton Core strategy and adopted local plan as being suitable for higher densities and a tall building. The London plan also identifies Collieswood as an opportunity area and an area for intensification. We've worked in alignment with these policies in the development of our scale, density and architectural quality. And our proposals have been deemed appropriate by officers, and we believe that the heights of the buildings are in keeping with surrounding precedents, such as Meason House at 12 stories, High Path approvals that are going to be ranging up to 12 stories, and also the Premier Inn over at 9 stories. Sunlight daylight modelling that we've undertaken shows 100% compliance with BRE guidance for sunlight amenity retained to neighbouring windows of the surrounding houses, and as well 100% compliance with shadowing to gardens as well. This is somewhat in contrast to some of the comments that we've had this evening. That the report that we've produced does not state this to be unreasonable in any manner. In fact, they're quite impressive. With housing targets under pressure and our above policy 44% affordable housing quantum, this scheme will make a significant contribution to the demand for affordable housing in Colliers Wood. And our compliant social housing mix will supply houses for 22 families on the social housing waiting list. We know that available sites that are capable of delivering affordable housing in Colliers Wood are a rarity, and typically most schemes that come forward offer much less affordable housing. As well as housing though, the scheme will provide real regenerative quality. The current use of the site is a dilapidated 70s industrial building enclosed by fencing with no river access, no local character, no public benefit, which prevents a bleak, derelict and unactivated site. This development will publicly activate the entire ground level of the site with new riverside public realm, including 2 new playgrounds. This will reveal the hidden river environment and create a new destination, bringing increased activation. This scheme will make a positive contribution to the area's character and a meaningful contribution to local need. In the balance, the public benefits such as 116 new homes, 46 of which are affordable, exemplary design, new public realm, children's playgrounds, improvements to pedestrian connectivity, sustainable transport options, new jobs, business opportunities, £1.7 million of seal contributions, a 70% biodiversity net gain, and increased urban greening should all outweigh any perceived harm. In conclusion, this is a sustainable, well-connected, policy-compliant scheme that brings significant and tangible benefits to the local area, and we sincerely look forward to inviting the local community in to enjoy the new Riverside public realm once completed. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have moving forward, and thank you very much. Jay.
Thank you, Steve. So it's a real privilege to be here today to present this scheme on a key site in such an important town, rich in history. It's a town that our practice court, Scott, has been linked to for over 10 years now. We understand, therefore, how important the river is to the place and the people of Colliers Wood, and how it always has been. For this reason, our shared vision is for a generous, new fully public Riverside Pocket Park at the heart of the scheme that transform the site of Backlands Shed into a vibrant riverside destination that melds distinctive architecture with nature. We have considered how the building is seen from all surrounding viewpoints, including, very importantly, the relationship from the collection of buildings at Merton Abbey Mills. The massing has been carefully considered with the tallest element of slender proportions and therefore forming a pleasing silhouette to the skyline. It will not be a box standard project. Details add depth to the facade and provide an animated expression. These include the base and lower part of the building has been inspired by the local industrial buildings. Windows have subtle arches and full brick deep reveals. Further articulation is provided through vertical piers, half a brick or more deep, which generate a play of light and shadow across the day. Rising up the building, the brick piers become progressively more slender, giving a sense of lightness to the upper stories, resonating with the Gothic buildings once on the site and culminating in a crown which engages with the sky. And high quality materials have been used throughout. It is very important to note that this building has been priced in detail and deliverable. Time and care has been taken with a full team of technical consultants to get the right solution. And all this demonstrates, I believe, the client's commitment.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, that was the two objectors and the applicant. We now have two of the members of the council for Abbey Ward. I've allowed this, the actual development is in Colliers Wood Ward, but the boundary between the two wards is right there, and Mill Road, Station Road are all in Abbey Ward. So I'm allowing the two councillors from Abbey Ward to speak. First, Eleanor Stringer, Councillor Eleanor Stringer, you have your 3 minutes, Ellie.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak about this application, which, as you say, is not actually in Abbey, but it most directly affects Abbey residents. So I'm here to represent their thoughts, but also two of the Colliers Wood councillors have also contacted me to ask that I share some of their concerns. So the residents of the nearby streets are experiencing a significant change in their local area. So even before this application, they've recently had the Abbey Wall Works development approved after the taller proposal was initially overturned by this committee, was rejected by this committee and then overturned. This is on top of the existing High Path development and the as yet undecided proposals for the additional towers around Britannia Point. So it's unsurprising that a great many residents have contacted us concerned about the impact of the proposed development on the area. The primary concerns in relation to the planning guidelines are that this is an overdevelopment of the site in an area of historic importance, that the density and design of the buildings are incongruous with the rest of the local area, and in particular, the heights of 13 and 10 stories are out of keeping with the tallest recent approvals being 7 stories high. The other higher blocks that have just been mentioned actually kind of don't overlook terraced residential houses like these would. Residents in Mill Road particularly worry about loss of light and the impact on their privacy, and there are also concerns about the bridge, which could lead to additional pedestrians cutting through these quiet streets, and questions about whether the road access could be from the other side of the river rather than through these quiet residential streets. I know that there are some people objecting who think there should be no development of the site whatsoever, and I do not share this view. I'm in favour of more house building because of both my political and personal roles. I'm acutely aware of the dire housing need that many people are living in locally. I regularly speak to families of 4 people living in 1-bedroom flats, sometimes with children with additional needs, and it's disastrous. I try to help them, but the answer is always the same, that there aren't enough homes in the area. Personally, I'm a trustee of a homelessness foundation, funding charities committed to helping address and prevent homelessness, and they are all unanimous that more housing is a non-negotiable. So I recognise that we need more housing, and that in a city like London and a borough like Merton, this is going to require building on small sites near to existing homes. and that this is going to inevitably cause some disruption and change to those living nearby. And I think we have to deal with these compromises. But the current design, I don't think is right for the local area. Despite there are many positives, I like the opening up of the side of the river and the new play areas. And I like that the level of affordable housing that I was initially concerned about has been increased. Reading the input from other experts has raised further concerns, though. So the response from the police in the report is pretty clear that the current design could generate safety concerns, and this surely, as a priority, must be addressed. I think some small changes to the design could address some of the main concerns, such as a reduction of height or rearranging the building so that the effect on residents' light and privacy is lessened, and addressing the aforementioned police concerns about safety. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ellie. Councillor Stringer. We have a contribution from Councillor Benbow, which he has submitted and will be read by our officer, Amy. Go ahead, Amy. Who is joining us online.
Thank you, Chair. Why is there a need to have two towering blocks, 10-storey and 13-storey, ruining the landscape of the local area? Yes, it is in Collierswood, but overlooking the Abbey area. The other side is Sainsbury's hypermarket. One thing stuck in my mind, which I queried to the developers several times, is the sheer height and mass of the proposed new two-building block of flats, literally right in the face of the existing residents living on Station Road, Mill Road, Dane Road, Croft Road and Abbey Road, all Edwardian or Victorian properties. This was my main concern, on whether the height and size of the proposed new building should be scaled back. The design of the buildings clearly does not blend in with the community surroundings and potentially harming our historical river Wandle. The flats are tiny, as demonstrated in the agenda pack, with numerous balconies overlooking the existing residents. This has been echoed by many residents with strong objections, and I have listened to them. To protect long-term residents over the developers, it is still clear to me, and perhaps to everyone else in this chamber, that the development will have a major impact on many existing residential houses. And I wish to ask the councillors of the Planning Committee to consider this very carefully. Please remember, this proposal is on their doorsteps and no one wants their lives being blighted. Secondly, I'm massively disappointed that this demonstrates the sheer height and mass of the proposed block of flats has virtually doubled or trebled the heights of another development, Abbey Wall Works, currently under construction on Station Road. How was this allowed? This brings me to the question whether the developers actually listened to the residents during their Q&A sessions. None of this has been addressed, but the planners are still happy for this application to be granted. I know Abbey has become a hotspot for tall residential blocks in the recent years, and it is clear that the Labour administration are not thinking of the consequences with the Abbey Wall Works development, New Harris School and High Path regeneration nearby. I fear it will be overpopulated and overcrowded in this corner of Abbey Ward once the new school reaches its full capacity. All the developments and the High Path estate regeneration have been completed. This must be questioned by the panellists. Residents' voices must be heard. It must be noted the development, with rather cramped interiors, is situated far too close to a major polluted road, Moranton Way. Excess noise, air pollution, high pollution, long-term effects on development. Naturally, the existing residents are concerned that the proposed development height and mass are too high and big, respectively, against their properties. This will result in the loss of sunlight on their front rooms and gardens throughout the year. Perhaps a 2- or 3-storey building would be more suitable and inviting without the risk of devaluing the beautiful existing Edwardian Victorian properties in Abbey Ward. What about the importance of preserving the historical river Wandle and the potential risks involved in this planning permission if given the go-ahead? I have concluded that this planning application to develop 42 Station Road is clearly not fit for purpose and will considerably affect the existing residents' lives. Hence, this application should be firmly rejected. It does no good to build excessive overdevelopments. I strongly urge the councillors of the Planning Committee to do the same. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Amy, and in his absence, thank you, Councillor Benbow, for that. That's the end of the contributions from outside of the members of the committee. Jonathan, are there any points raised in all of those contributions you'd like to come back on or clarify?
Chair, I wondered if
Yeah, please do. Jonathan's going to share his screen again and share some images and take you through those.
Chair and members, some of the key concerns have been about the scale and bulk and height of the buildings. But the applicant provided officers with a context drawing showing a number of the other buildings within the locality. And you'll see where the hand is circling. Bitson House, which is near the retail development, the Premier Inn, which has been in place for upwards of 20 years now. We have the buildings on the other side of Moranton Way. Members will recall there was the proposal which was refused by committee and then allowed on appeal, literally within a stone's throw of this application site, and then the High Path estate. Looked at in the round, the London Plan policies, in conjunction with those of Merton Council, acknowledge that the Colliers Wood area is one for intensification, and it's really sort of judging at what point that intensification is acceptable and at what point it goes beyond reasonable thresholds. And what officers have done in this instance, and you'll see this in the report, is we've expressed our judgment in terms of the heights of the building, but we've provided technical assessments in terms of things like overshadowing and overlooking and loss of privacy. So in terms of in terms of measurable benchmarks that we would use, officers are content that there's no sound basis to withhold permission in that respect. In terms of the judgment which is to be exercised, again, officers have taken time to consider the wider overall context, set that in context with the more than doubling of the housing targets arising from the 2021 London Plan, which has been published. Consider the PTAL score in the area, which rises to up to 4, which is really very good. And set within that context, the overall judgment we've come to is that buildings of this scale could reasonably be supported. And that would seem to chime with what the officers at the GLA have said. You'll see, moving on to issues about traffic and parking, that we're looking at Section 106 obligations to restrict parking. We're looking at making sure that servicing is properly catered for on the site. Moving on to points about the green corridor and wildlife. Again, officers have not shied away from this, but you'll see within a very detailed report, there's extensive consideration of biodiversity impacts and the potential to gain benefits in this particular instance. Considering the points about affordable housing, not only are the proposals delivering a significant number of new dwellings, but they are delivering much needed affordable housing, which again should be considered in the round in this particular case. Interestingly, Councillor Stringer's point about concerns to do with permeability, the proposals do provide links through the site into the residential area beyond. But really, this is something which is integral to the whole objective of promoting good urban design, where we try and avoid existing barriers such as roads, watercourses such as this, as resulting in people making circuitous detours to get from one place to another. And something like providing a bridge over the Wandle, taking pedestrians away from the carriageway before they go into the quieter residential areas beyond, is seen as something positive. I acknowledge the concerns raised by both Councillor Stringer and Councillor Benbow and the residents about height, but as I've endeavoured to explain, when considered in the round with the various policy objectives and the various policy requirements that Merton has to address in the coming decade, officers judge that this scheme is something that could reasonably be supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. We now move, before we have any kind of debate on the issue, we move to questions of clarification on the report. to the officers for members of the committee who may wish to raise any questions at this stage. I see.
Sorry,
Councillor...
Chair, may I just add a couple of points? Sorry,
John, certainly. Sorry, Lee, go ahead.
Sorry, just to point out on the issue of the vehicle traffic and everything, the Eddie Cat's previous use was for a nursery, and that in itself included quite a large amount of traffic with people to and from, and this site would just be the deliveries. So with 116 units, one might think that that equated. The issue of fire access, the application was accompanied by quite an extensive transport assessment with a lot of swept path analysis for all types of vehicles being accessed into the site. And I think the applicant's model shows that you can quite easily get a fire engine into the site. Hopefully there won't be needed to do that very often, but that could be there. And it is also covered with a fire safety statement on how that's going to be kept safe. And the issues of the police often will comment quite in depth on an application because the drawings that we get don't tend to cover those aspects of safety. One of the conditions is for it to reach a certain standard for the safer by design aspect. So a lot of those elements will be coming to the final by condition. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I saw Councillor McGrath wanted to have a question, and while Councillors Draper, Southgate, Crowe, Latif, Alan Bretus, in that order, I've noted them down. So Councillor McGrath, Simon first.
Thank you. Mine's just a simple one about the status of our decision. Am I right from my reading of 1.1 that we are making an indicative decision and that whatever we decide, the mayor still has the final say? Is that right?
Sorry. Before you answer, I think I'm going to take 3 questions and then take answers on all 3 and then take the next 3. So the next 2 I have Councillors Draper and then Southgate. So Councillor Draper, Nick.
Yeah, I've got a query about access to the shopping centre from the development. You have to go across the access road into the Saver Centre, whatever it's called, and there doesn't appear to be any easy access. Are there any plans for making a proper pedestrian crossing on that side?
Thank you. And Councillor Southgate, Peter.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to know the density of the 2 blocks, and if I could throw in a second question while we're at it, the height of Saver Centre, what does that equate in terms of stories?
Okay, thank you. The officers could deal with those 3. We have the question about the GLA and the decision, and then the more detailed questions on the application.
Yes, Councillor, you're right. It would have to go to the mayor. You would be making an opinion. You either supported it or you didn't. We would then refer it on to the mayor with our report, comments from neighbours, and then it would become something for the mayor to very similar to Benedict Wharf and some of the other larger schemes like that. There wasn't a scheme for a full crossing proposed with this. There are some various Section 278 arrangements to come when this gets to a later stage. So it may be a thing that the applicants could come towards some arrangement with Sainsbury's on how that's going to work, because you're quite right. It would need something because it isn't the safest crossing as it is for them to go into Sainsbury's. But obviously with the bridge, you could walk up the side of the river and go around that way, should you wish, rather than go through the car park.
Thank you. And then the 2 questions from Councillor Southgate. The second one was how high is the current Sainsbury's building?
Chair, the density is expressed in number of units per hectare and number of rooms per hectare on page 60 of the agenda paper. The density comes in at 1,349 habitable rooms per hectare, which members may consider to be high. But again, for something like this, if we're going to endorse a substantial development proposal, then inevitably it's going to have a high density. It's whether or not we feel that a high density in a highly accessible location is appropriate or inappropriate. And our judgment is, if you're going to put a high density development somewhere, then it should be somewhere which is benefiting from good public transport accessibility. And then the final observation was about the Sabre Centre. I don't know if we've got any images on the drawings which actually show the Sabre Centre in context with this.
Well, I don't remember seeing that, but obviously
site.
I live very close and shop there a lot. The Sabre Centre is basically 2 stories, but 2 very high ceiling stories because they're the shopping centres. So I would guess the total height is equivalent to 5 or probably 6-story building.
I was
as a guess.
Interesting.
I don't think we have the exact numbers.
Interesting. I would concur with Councillor Ward on that. That I think we are looking at something like that. But again, a little bit difficult to judge because we've got the Sabre Centre, which is in a slight hollow. The land rises ever so slightly. Yes, whether or not just getting a benchmark on story heights really tells the full story, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Right, I have 3 more questions in order. Councillors Crowe, Latif and Alan Bretis. So Councillor Crowe, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. My question concerns the disabled flats. I noticed in the housing mix on page 62, there are 12 flats designated as wheelchair user dwellings, and that's excellent. I'm very pleased with that. However, scrutinising the model earlier before the meeting started and looking in the report, I see that there are only 3 parking bays designated for disabled drivers or disabled use, I should perhaps say. And I'm just wondering if that's adequate. I'm thinking it probably isn't. So my question is there any policy or guidance that links wheelchair user flats to disabled parking bays?
Okay, thank you. As I said, we'll come to all 3 answers. So Councillor Latif Najib.
Thank you, Chair. My question is relating to the design review panel, which it said it received an amber rating, but the panel said that much more design work still needs to be done. So my question is actually twofold. First of all, what were the changes that the design review panel wanted? And secondly, does this current scheme reflect the changes that the design review panel wanted to get it to agree?
Thank you. And Councillor Alan Bretis, Stephen.
Thank you. My question relates to the offer by the developers to add a new bridge or footbridge. Is this really necessary? There have been some concerns by residents that this may lead to antisocial behaviour, that it's not really necessary. So that's my question.
Thank you. So officers, those 3 questions.
So Chair and members, the question about wheelchair bays, it's interesting how the perception that we always have with flats for people with disabilities is that invariably they're people with mobility disabilities. You know, you could have flats where someone is partially sighted. So you may wish to design a flat for somebody who is registered disabled, but because of their visual impairment, wouldn't drive in any event. You may have somebody who is disabled because of some other medical condition, which doesn't necessarily impede their ability to walk, move through space, walk to the bus stop, but that there are other aspects of their registered disabled nature which would preclude them from being able to drive safely. And so I think that's it. It's often the case that we sort of think disabled people, people in, with mobility issues, we need to cater for car parking. Whereas I think if you look at, and the GLA have produced some very extensive research and design guidance on this. If you look at disability in its broadest sense, the notion that somehow, it's important to try and provide parking bays for people with disabilities is perhaps not quite hitting the target on something like this. And again, it's interesting that the GLA will often push down the need for disabled parking bay provision on a site. I don't have statistics for London, but as I said, I would simply raise that point that disability and mobility impairment, the two sets on that Venn diagram don't completely overlap one another. And so I think in that sense, the GLA aren't raising issues about the disabled parking arrangements. And I think we might be perhaps going a little bit off topic if we do the same.
Councillor Latif's point about design review panel, David Amber, and requested some changes.
Yes, 3.5 in the report lists some of the changes that came in from the design, some of the issues to the brickwork, design and changing bits of panel work that went into it, the crime prevention officer's comments being taken on board, a pedestrian ramp, and they acquired some extra land to allow the buildings to be slightly more offset. Were all part of the revised decision. Obviously, it didn't go back to a third design review panel, so we haven't in a position to get a green from them, but we felt that the design improvements were such that it was warranted support.
Thank you. And finally, was Councillor Ambritas on the footbridge.
Yeah, the footbridge is, you could make an argument either way. It's been put forward by the applicants because they feel that it's of a benefit to the site and the wider community and allows it to be more accessible and not all confined to the one entrance. Conversely, you might feel that it doesn't do anything to help. I would personally doubt whether it would add anything to antisocial behaviour beyond what's already down there. If you wanted to do antisocial behaviour, somebody's built a nice brick bench that you could sit on and antisocially behave were you so minded. I don't think the bridge personally would add to that, but obviously there would be more foot traffic through there, so one could come either side on that. But
if I could comment on that, the far southern end of the site, and we know that many of the people who live there will want to go to Colliers Wood, to the tube station and the shops there. If you wanted as a pedestrian to go from the southern edge of the site to Colliers Wood station, without that footbridge, you'd have to walk to the far north of the site, cross the river, and then down the path to the side of the river all the way down to Sainsbury's. And the footbridge is literally going to take 10 minutes of walking off people's journeys to Colliers Wood, improving the transport access to the tube station. Yeah. Councillor Dehaney, you wanted to ask a question. I'm looking out for anyone else while Councillor Dehaney makes this.
116 residential units. Is there adequate provision for refuse disposal?
Yes, guys.
Do we have any other councillors with questions? Sorry, I didn't have my mic on. Councillor Crowe, which I'll take, I think, as the final question before we go on to the debate.
I would just like some clarification over this sunlight and overshadowing issue, because I think the applicant said that there wasn't an issue, but in the report it says that 2 houses are below the BRE standards. So I'd like some clarity on that, please.
Okay, so those 2 issues, waste disposal and overshadowing.
The refuge is a very large area. The council's refuge officer has had a look on this and she's raised no objections to it. Quite a large space underneath both of the buildings, so it would all be enclosed with inside. Then an on-site management company would take it out, put it onto a marked out bin storage area on the day of collection, would be collected by the refuse company. Then the empty bins would go back into the site. So there's plenty of space within the ground floor of the building for that. The issues of the BRE, you will note in the report, it does go into it in quite detail. Some elements are 100% compliant, so they're not misleading on that, but varying parts within it. So for example, it says for sunlight, the results are fully BRE compliant, but on other elements, especially for like 32 Mill Road, there would be some reductions in the visual sky element. So, but the reductions aren't such that they would put them under. So a couple of them have a very small transgressions on it. Most of them are, but most of them are compliant. The gardens and everything are right. But there is a little bit. It breaks down within the report into about 6 different sections and different considerations, and some are 100% compliant and some are not quite on a couple of the windows. But you can see from we had the pictures. The trees that are there. We were down there today having another look. Do quite a lot of already overshadowing of the properties as it is from the trees. So in fact, the trees add that perhaps the model thing it doesn't do it justice is the size of those trees and how they would affect the overshadowing and indeed the privacy element, the fact that you would have to be so far up to look up to these properties. So if that helps.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move to comments from members of the committee. Can I see any hands? Councillor Alan Brutus, go ahead.
Thank you. So I wanted to thank the officers, I wanted to thank the councillors, Councillor Benbow, Councillor Ellie Stringer, and everyone here for their interest in this matter. I am minded by the application that this council refused. I think it's the wall, the application that's called the wall along that area that was refused by this council but passed by Her Majesty's government inspector. When these things happen, the taxpayer loses. We lose as an authority. I understand when we refuse an application, but it is passed by the inspectorate. And so for my part, I'm very enthused by the sustainable transport element of this application. I'm enthused by the percentage of affordable housing, 44%. But obviously, we need to listen, take a balanced view, and I am listening, and I appreciate especially the points made by Councillor Stringer about, on the one hand and on the other hand, you know, the dire need for housing, not just here in this London Borough of Merton, but throughout the whole of London, and indeed throughout the whole of the country. I think that's something that plays on all our minds. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you. This is actually a question, but it comes out of Councillor Alan Brutus's point. If we're not the final decision maker, would we in fact be responsible for any expenses if it went to the inspector?
I don't think it's something. It's true that sometimes if we turn something down and it goes to appeal, we sometimes can have costs awarded against us, but that's a long way down the road, and especially it's different when the mayor's office is involved.
Chair, Councillor McGrath, if there were costs to be covered in the event that the mayor turned down the proposal, so both the council and the mayor, the costs would amount to attending and preparing for an appeal or a hearing, or at worst an inquiry. But given that the mayor ultimately would be the decision maker on this, if it was deemed to be a reckless and unjustifiable decision, then it would be the attention directed towards the mayor's office rather than the local planning authority.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Christie.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened closely to many of the comments from some of the nearby residents, from Councillor Stringer, Councillor Bembo, outlining some of their concerns about the application. And I do understand that neighbours of this site who would be living next to a new tall building, may not be pleased about the prospect of this building going up. However, this must be one of the first applications, perhaps this year, that's come to this committee that has a number of not only affordable homes, but social housing in it. And, I think it's a great shame that when we consult on these applications, the many thousands of people that are on our housing waiting list aren't consulted on what their views are on these applications that would provide homes for just a small number of them who are on the waiting list. So, I've heard the concerns that have been raised tonight, and I do empathise, but from my perspective, I've heard nothing tonight that makes me have any serious technical planning concerns about the proposal. So from my view, I'll be supporting the application tonight, and pleased to see that we will be delivering affordable and social housing in the borough with this development. Thank you.
Thank you. So Councillor Southgate, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Quite a lot of points here, really. And one is the status of Colliers Wood as an area for intensification, an opportunity area, and the way that I had envisaged that might be developed with Britannia Point as the pinnacle building. Now, my concern here is that this building is absolutely on the edge of the intensification zone, and if we are to see over time an orderly and pleasing development, I don't want to see the tallest building stuck right on the edge. I think if one is going to consider a balanced development, this is not the place to be going to 13 stories. So possibly 7, 10 stories. So that's point one, how it will look. Point two is the impact on the more immediate area, and we've spent quite a lot of time in this immediate area, haven't we, in recent years? So number 40 Station Road, right alongside there on the other side of the Wandle, one of the ones that I feel pleased about every time I walk past it, actually, is 3 stories high. The Abbey Wall building, okay, it was overturned on appeal, but we're certainly looking at 4 or 5 stories there. Further along, the new academy at about 5 stories, I think. In the immediate area, of course, the properties in Dane Road and Mill Road are very much compact 2-story buildings. So this coming along at 13 stories, frankly, nukes the whole, character of that neighborhood. I think it's out of all proportion to what we should be willing to countenance here. The third point I'm going to make is about the impact on heritage assets and this really, this area is absolutely the epicenter of our heritage assets in the borough, surely, with the I don't remember what they all are now. The chapter house under Moranton Way, Merton Abbey Mills, the association with William Morris, the old Abbey Wall, even surrounding the Abbey Wall development. So the wording in the officer's report here talks about no substantial harm, but I am reading that, frankly, as some harm. So there is a judgment there to be made about whether it's whether it's appropriate to be doing something on this scale. And okay, I take the examples of Mizzen House and others, but if I stand there on that pathway or envisage the trees cleared away, I don't see Mizzen House. I don't see these other reference points. I don't see Britannia Point. I see 2-story houses. I see 4 or 5-story blocks further along High Path. This is just out of all appropriate scale to be going to these kind of heights. Now, lots of things we like. I think we're agreed, the affordable housing. I personally like the footbridge. I always favor routes that advantage pedestrians over cars. But really, I would like to see this scaled back to 2 blocks at 7 and 10 stories. Even that's a lot, but I think it's more palatable and accepting it is an opportunity area for intensification.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Southgate. I have Councillors Henry, Draper and Crowe in that order. I'll take those in that order, and then if anyone who hasn't spoken yet would like to, please wave while the 3 are speaking. Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank the officers and architects and everyone who put this plan together. As we all know, times are changing. Technologies are changing. We talk about heights, we talk about different things, but what we want to talk about, the things that matter most. I've read through this application. I think it's fit for purpose. And, you know, where the affordable houses are concerned, I thought in this council for the past 8 years, and I've been in housing, and it so happens that this is one of the first one I've seen with so much affordable housing, which we have. And I just want to say, you know, I am totally in agreement with this application, and I think it's fit for purpose, and I hope officers will think the same as I do. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Draper, Nick.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. And again, I'd like to repeat my thanks to everybody who's helped compile this and all the speakers to date. I've got an interest that I chose not to declare because I don't think it's material. I'm a trustee of the Merton Priory, and I was just thinking about that. It specifically works around the chapter house, which is under Moranton Way, unlike most of the rest of the Priory, which is under the Sainsbury's car park. Yes, it is part of our heritage, but it's a very, very well hidden heritage. I'm sorry about that, Peter. It's the truth. I spent 16 years as a Colliers-Wood councillor, but Colliers-Wood has been an area of intensification for an awful lot longer than that. I believe it was first made an area of intensification under Ken Livingstone. And I've had to tell that fact to many people who've moved into Colliers-Wood and so then said, why are we having all these high rises? Well, we're having high rises because it's an area of intensification. It's been there for quite a long time. I have to say, though, that one project that I suppose I was involved in was the 12-storey tower, which has been referred to, which is on Prince George's Road. I can never remember the name of it. When that was actually came up in front of planning, there were virtually no objections to it at all. Despite actually the fact there's far less affordable housing there is in this. And the interesting thing about that is that since it's been built, nobody objected to me about it either. And it really has become just part of our landscape. And that's the reality about a lot of these buildings, that they don't stick out like sore thumbs. They do become part of a landscape. You know, until any building is built, it's not part of the landscape. That's the reality of it. But as far as I'm concerned, the people we should be worrying about the most are not the people around the development, but the people who will be in the development themselves. We've heard about the fact that a lot of those people will be people who are living in affordable housing because they can't afford anything else. In most respects, they're just ordinary people like you and I, with ordinary needs. And I have to echo some of the concerns that have been said about access for emergency vehicles. I think that's very, very important. And I think we need to look at that in the conditions. The point that I raised about access to shops, access to the tube station, easy access. I don't mean going around the houses like the chair pointed out, real easy access. That should be made clear as part of the conditions as well. I think that's really, really, really important. And that bridge, if we got rid of that bridge, that would be trying to turn this thing into an island, trying to keep it away from the rest of Colliers Wood, away from the rest of Merton. We don't want to do that. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it properly. We're going to say to the residents like you and I who will be living in this, you are welcome here in Merton. We want to have you. You probably gathered from this, Chair, that I am in favour of this report, but I think it's very, very important that we actually see it from the point of view of the people who will be living there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Craig. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Well, like colleagues, I'm delighted that we have a proposal of 116 flats and perhaps even more importantly, that 40% are affordable. However, my starting point with this is the policy, London Plan Policy D9, which says that tall buildings must be of exemplary quality. And I just have one or two doubts about whether this particular proposal is of the exemplary quality that we really want. Yes, we want the 116 and the affordability, but we've got to consider the quality point. And I think there are a number of issues about the proposal. I would have been so much happier if it had gone to the design review panel and come to this meeting with a green rating, but obviously it hasn't. I'm concerned about the overshadowing. If I lived in Mill Road or Station Road or one of the other roads, and I was not used to overshadowing because all the overshadowing and sunlight I got was only affected by trees, to have 13 stories go up would be, I think, a tremendous loss of amenity. And while some of those residents may still be within BRE guidelines of 2 hours of sunlight on the 31st of March each year, they may be losing an awful lot of sunlight. So I think that's a design issue. I think there's also a design issue about the access to the buildings, how the fire engines get in. I'm a bit concerned, despite what the experts say, that each tower only has one staircase. I kind of thought that 2 staircases was the expected norm now, but I'm probably just wrong on that point, but I think it's a question of judgment. I am definitely of the view that if we have 12 flats which have designation for wheelchair use, we should be providing more than 3 disabled parking bays. 12 wheelchair users, 12 cars, 3 parking bays. Doesn't make sense. So I'm not really convinced that this is an application where the design is of exemplary quality, which is what policy D9 suggests is the requirement. So I'm not really content with this.
Okay, thank you. That being all the comments, I'm not going to, as the chair, obviously I'm neutral, I'm not going to try and lead the committee in any way. I just will say a few things because I am a member who represents the good people of Colliers Wood, and it is about the intensification of the area that Councillor Draper was mentioning. My view is on this and other applications is that going as far as the hospital up at St George's, either quarter of an hour walk or a short bus ride away, and then add in all the retail around Colliers Wood and the other employment around there, many of it retail employment, nurses, ancillary health workers that aren't particularly well paid. And I think it's important that we build housing close to people's workspaces so that they can travel to and from work, preferably on foot, on a bicycle, or with a short bus ride. I don't think we're aiming here to build, or across Collieswood, to build very many flats for people who will jump in their, very few for people who will jump in their car every day to go to work, and fewer that will jump on the tube and go up to central London. I think for me, it is about allowing people to afford to live close to where they work on sometimes lower incomes. And that's why, for me, and not just on this application, but across the intensification of Collieswood, the affordability and social housing is incredibly important. That is the end of the comments. We now move to the vote. The recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to any direction from the Mayor of London and the completion of a Section 106 agreement and the conditions. From the members of the committee, can I see all those in favour of the recommendation? I can see 5. All those against? I can see 4 not voting. Myself. 5 to 4, the application is passed. That doesn't mean planning permission is granted. It means we refer it up to the Mayor of London's office. Okay, next on the agenda, I think we've been going in just over an hour. I think we'll probably be able to rattle through 6 and 5, come to the end of the meeting without having a break. But if anyone is desperate to go to the toilet, please wave and we'll have a break. But I think we'll run straight into item 6. Okay, agenda item 6 is replacement of a bedroom window with doors in Russell Road in Wimbledon. The officer responsible for this is Tim, who I believe is joining us on Zoom.
Thank you, Chair. Just going to share my screen.
Thank you. Welcome. We can hear you.
Members, the application site is 52B Russell Road. It's a building that comprises 3 flats. The application is for a pair of double doors which replace an existing window. The application works have already been completed. The purpose of the application, it provides access from the flat at ground floor at the front to the outdoor space associated with it. So that on the right-hand side is the existing building, neighbouring buildings on the left. Existing window before it was done, and this is proposed with the double doors. Members will note the planning history section of the report. There was the fence you can see here, and the double doors were put in without the benefit of planning permission. An planning application was received by the council. However, it was refused by the council on the delegated powers, but it was only refused in regard to the fence in terms of its street scene impacts. That application was appealed and the inspector dismissed the appeal. Again, he dismissed it on the street scene impacts of the fence. But it should be noted that the double doors was not an issue raised by us as a council in the previous application, and nor was it a reason for dismissing the appeal by the planning inspector. So the application before you is just for the doors only. Photograph from one of our enforcement officers. An enforcement notice was served in September for action by October for the removal of the fence. The owners have done that and put in some soft landscaping. And here is the picture of the double doors from the pavement. And members, just to show you previously the window that used to be there. So overall, Chair, officers recommend permission be granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Similar to the last application, we have 2 objectors who will get 3 minutes each, an agent for 6 minutes, and then a statement from Councillor Benbow. So the objectors, again, in the order I have them on my sheet. James White, are you in the room or on Zoom? In the room. Thank you. Are you able to turn your microphone on? Thank you very much. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, good evening. Merton Planning have allowed this retrospective planning application to continue for 20 months, despite the reasons why it should not be considered, which I will shortly list. During this time, the Planning Department have failed to keep the 52 Russell Road Residents Association updated with what is happening or what should be happening. The Residents Association have had to chase all the time for information. The works are illegal as they contravene the lease. This is now in the hands of solicitors, as Merton have failed to use their powers and act despite the lease being offered to them on numerous occasions for review. These works were refused by Merton Planning on the 16th of September 2020 and by the Inspector of Planning on 14th of June 2021. The applicant took over 2 months to remove the fence, and only when the council instructed lawyers to act, costing the council money. The applicant has shown contempt to Merton Council Planning and the neighbours of Russell Road through this whole process. This is the second time the French Windows planning application has been made. According to gov.uk, enforcement and post-permission matters, a person who has undertaken unauthorised development has only one opportunity to obtain planning permission after the event, under section 73A of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. So why are we here tonight discussing this? The current application is factually incorrect. Why is it not shown as a retrospective application? Under description of proposed works, the works were completed without consent. The finished date of the 24th of June 2020 is untrue. The property was altered by the 26th of February 2020. How could there have been an enforcement letter on the 4th of April if the works had not happened? There is a tree in the front garden. Ownership certificates and agricultural land declarations is stated that on the 21 days before the date of this application, nobody except myself was the owner of any part of the land or building to which the application relates. This is not true. The freeholders own the property. Since all planning is covered by a statutory instrument, then all facts must be correct. Why are we here tonight without these being changed? The local residents did not know what was happening, as no notices has been erected outside 52 Russell Road. Part of the statutory document for planning refers to allowing people to comment on the issue. If they don't know what is happening, they can't comment. This is a direct infringement of the statutory document. As the works were carried out secretly, there has been no building control or completion certificate. No one knows if the works are of adequate standard. The changes do not fit with the character of the building nor of that of the street. They also go against Merton's Council's plan of the streetscape in its supplementary guise. This will set an unacceptable precedent. Some at the council seem to think this is a trivial problem. If after what has been said, and that is still thought, then we have a major problem with Merton Planning. From this list of damning points, the council should not consider this application and refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, James. Sue Budgeon, are you in the room? Or you're in the room. Hi, Sue. You also, thank you for bringing your microphone on. You also have 3 minutes.
Yes, I live in Russell Road. I'm a long-standing resident, and my house overlooks diagonally 52 Russell Road, which bears a plaque saying it is local cottage 1880. And I think that the character of the building has been dramatically altered by this development. The original plans for the 3 flats retained the Victorian facade. In fact, for a long time, I didn't even know there were flats. It looked like a Victorian cottage. But I do contend that the French doors do harm the character of the building. You will not find a Victorian cottage in this country that has a front door and French doors by the side in the front. Secondly, the plans show you only the doors shut. So when the French doors are open, which are necessary for the ventilation of the room, they open outward and they take up more space on the facade of the front of the building. So you have a back door, French door facility in the front of a streetscape. And I'm concerned that this would set a precedent. Would I, for example, be allowed to alter the front of my terraced house to create French doors into my own private garden on the other side of the road, etc., etc.? Also, I do not think that the council should take lightly the fact that there are that the applicant has broken a legal obligation to fellow freeholders in this application. The council has a responsibility to uphold the rule of law and not to facilitate residents to break the law. It well knows that if this permission were given, the only thing the other freeholders can do is to go to law, which will involve yet more time, stress, and money. And the council has a responsibility to its residents in its health and well-being strategy to ensure the well-being of its residents, and it should not willingly put the innocent victims of this application, the other freeholders, into a situation where their well-being is undermined.
Thank you very much for that. We have the agent, Magdalena. Are they in the room or on Zoom?
I'm on Zoom. Good evening.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead. You have 6 minutes if you'd like to use that amount of time.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Chair. I probably won't need 6 minutes. That's a very generous provision. I can only, well, I'm the agent acting on behalf of the applicant. I can only comment on the points that are relating to material considerations or planning considerations. So obviously any points made on the issues between leaseholders, freeholders, and all these things are obviously not a planning consideration or material consideration that this forum is an appropriate place to discuss, and I'm sure the neighbors will come to an agreement on their own time in due course. Any points made on building control are obviously a building control matter. So again, this is not really a forum to discuss that. Just to kind of give you a bit of a context. Obviously, the applicant did conduct the works without the benefit of planning application. Regrettably, the applicant took an advice from a fitter, very bad advice, and was truly mortified, having known, having learned that that the works were actually in breach of the planning kind of requirements, and hence the first application was made to right that wrong. That went to appeal, and in appeal, the fencing was the element that was refused, really. So again, the applicant removed the offending element, and the next application was made to get the French doors legalized, really. So it could be argued that the second application is not exactly the same retrospective application that was made in the first place, as not both elements are kind of being taken into consideration. And again, I would like to point to the appeal officer who didn't have any objections to the to French doors themselves. They are made of a material that is being used in all joinery in all the other elements in the cottage. So all the other windows or the other doors are UPVC, white UPVC material. And obviously this is trying to achieve a delicate balance between applicants' wish to make use of the very very small private amenity she has access to from her bedroom, which is actually the front room, and the respect for the built environment around. So it is a delicate balance, and I'm glad to hear that the planning officer kind of contends with that and is in favor of this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Now, Officer Amy has a statement from Councillor Benbow to read to the committee, joining us by Zoom again.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to ask why numerous applications, including the appeal, are being allowed to be made for the French doors, as previous planning permissions had already been refused twice for the French doors and 2-metre high enclosing fence together. Without the use of fences at the front, the French doors would certainly not be installed. This application is about replacing the front windows with French doors, but please let me be clear, the fact is the French doors are already installed without seeking permission of the freeholders. It seems odd that the applicants are seeking for planning permission. What happened to the freeholders' rights? Imagine if you were the freeholder, would you allow the applicant to make changes to your home without permission? No, of course not. It's morally wrong. 52 Russell Road is an important historic building in the Russell Road area, an attractive Victorian farm workers cottage style and uniquely with an original stonemason's plaque on its front gable, bearing the words local cottage 1880 under a decorative brickwork fan shape. The newly installed French doors are not only out of keeping with the 1880 style of the property, they're also awkwardly right next to the cottage's original front door. The destruction of the original downstairs sash window and replacement with French doors have changed the front of number 52 into a mockery of its 1880 design. Though it is not a listed building, it is surely worth preserving its original form. And therefore I would urge and request the PAC members to require its restoration. I cannot understand why the planners found the French doors to be acceptable and now a very small proposal which would not normally be determined by the planning committee. Why freeholders' rights? May I point out, whilst the planners are recommending this application to be granted, there is a list of objectives to the application they have reproduced in the agenda relates more to other issues than the issue to be decided on the French doors, making it a less important issue. The unsuitability of the French doors must be considered. The high fences are now removed, therefore the original windows should be restored. The applicants confirmed to the planners that you can be a leaseholder and still apply for planning permission as long as it has at least 7 years on the leasehold. But the fact is they failed to seek the freeholder's permission clearly stated on the lease. A few points I wish to make. The council should not proceed with any application if the leaseholder who has put in the application for works does so without the freeholder's permission. Installing French doors, whether or not the inspector sees it as appropriate or not, is immaterial at this point. It is a structural addition amendment to the property, which the freeholder has to approve. A clause in the lease to say works to property cannot proceed without freeholder consent. The applicants would be in breach of the contract if they proceed without freeholder consent. I strongly advise planning committee members to reject this application for the French doors on planning grounds and restore the front windows. Otherwise, the freeholder will be pursuing a legal action for the removal of the French doors on legal, not planning grounds. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Now, we're going to go back to Tim, the officer, to comment now, and I want to ask him, and then we'll move to questions and comments from members, that we stick. I mean, there were a lot of issues raised in those contributions, those 4 contributions, and we need to stick to just the issues, which is our job as planning committee to decide. So it's nothing to do with the fence at the front of the property. That's been decided. It's about only the French doors. So if we could all keep our comments to that, please. So Tim, if you could clarify on the legal side of that, and anything else that was raised in those contributions which you'd like to comment on.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A number of issues raised there in the comments. Matters between freeholders and leaseholders is not a matter for the council planning decision to get involved with. That is a private matter. In terms of some procedural matters, in terms of a site notice, this type of application doesn't warrant a mandatory site notice. What the council does is write letters to neighbouring occupiers to the site, which has been done. In terms of the procedures to date, so there was a previous application which was refused by the council, but in the reasons for refusal, it was only refused on the fence grounds. It went to appeal, and the inspector concluded the same, that the fence was harmful to the character of the area. Whereas the double doors installed are not. And in terms of the enforcement notice, Chair, was served, but the enforcement notice again related purely to the fence to be removed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Do I have any questions from the members? Questions on the clarification on the report? Councillor Crowe. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I regret I didn't always hear what Amy said because of background noise, but it seemed as if Councillor Bembo was under the impression that 2 applications around the French doors had previously been refused. Have I misheard that, or is that an error?
I think you may have misheard. I believe it's 1, and as the officer was just explaining, the application was refused on the grounds of the fence, went to appeal. The planning inspector agreed with the council that it should have been refused on the grounds of the fence. The window and French doors was not a reason for refusal of that application. Any other comments? I'm sorry, any other questions from councillors? Councillors Alan Bretus and then Draper in that order. We'll take them. Councillor Southgate, I think, has a comment, but we're still on questions. So Alan Bretus and Draper, I'll take them both and then go back to the officer.
Yeah, it's just a straightforward question on this. Just confirmation that the French doors are at ground level. Can someone just confirm to me what must be blindingly obvious to everyone, that they are at ground level and therefore there's no light loss? They're at ground level.
Councillor Draper, I mean, I can answer that question without going back to the officer. Yes, they're at ground floor level. Councillor Draper.
Yeah, I just wanted to see, any chance you could put up the picture of the front of the house again, just very briefly?
We have 2, I believe, one as it is now and one as it was.
As it is now.
We are maybe useful as it was, but as it is now,
That's
certainly.
as was. That's as was. That's as is now, isn't it? Oh, that's as is with the fence, which is gone. That's as is now. Got it. Okay, it's in my mind now.
Okay, thank you. Comments, Councillor Southgate, and then anyone else wave if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. These things don't often come up, but it does highlight the role of front gardens as part of the public realm and the important part they play actually in when we walk down the street as to whether it's a pleasant experience or not, and why, frankly, I think we all regret the extent to which front gardens have been turned over to hard standing. So in this case, the enclosure with fencing effectively annexed that semi-public space, that public good, as the economists would call it, as a private amenity space, and that's really the issue now. The fencing is gone.
Sorry, that isn't the issue, because the fence has been fixed. The fence was told it shouldn't be there and it's been taken down. So public views into the front garden is not the issue. The issue is the window and the French doors, not the fence. Sorry, I need to keep you to the actual issue before us.
No, I'm saying now that's gone, frankly, there really isn't a problem.
Good. Any other comments? There being no other comments, the application recommendation is to grant permission subject to conditions. Can I see all those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. With my 1 non-vote, in effect unanimous. Thank you. That one's decided. I should say the committee has agreed to grant planning permission subject to conditions. The final one on the agenda tonight, item 5, is Hayford Road in Rains Park, and I believe it's Jonathan again.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen. Chair, the application's been brought before members this evening because of the number and scope of objections that have been raised. Members will see from the agenda papers a number of drawings showing the proposals. So a dwelling with 2 bedrooms arranged under a pitched roof with the with the first floor of accommodation within the roof space. I'll go back to the drawings in a moment, but I'll just take you around the site. I visited the site. There are a number of lock-up garages. There's an open yard in front of the garages, which is concreted. Beyond the site, and this is the boundary with the adjoining property in Springfield Avenue, is a line of mature lowlandi trees, providing quite a screen. Again, you can see a grassed area beyond. That's part of the application site. Looking back towards the site, you'll notice one of two telegraph poles within the site. And there are blocks of flats opposite the site. And then as we turn the corner, again, most of this grassed area forms part of what would be an enclosed garden space for the proposed dwelling. And then looking into the corner, we've got a number of interwar maisonettes on the site, and then leading down into the corner of the road, and then again looking at the corner of the site. And just to give you some context, the planning history, this is probably the third application that we've had on the site. You'll see from the report on pages 6 and 7, 2 refusals for dwellings. We had this scheme that was refused, and you'll see grounds concerning the design bulk massing of the proposals, and then another proposal, again, a full 2 floors with a pitched roof on top. And if I can now take you back to what's now being proposed on the site, we have something which officers feel is, a genuine improvement on previous proposals, materially different in terms of bulk scale and massing. Granted, the proposals do look different from the surrounding dwellings, but we have Springfield Avenue, 2-story semi-detached and short terraces of 2-story houses, Hayford, some 2-story maisonettes, some 3-story flats, and this open site. So again, diverse character, but I think in terms of that sort of suburban vernacular style, this is something that wouldn't look out of context on this particular site. Officers consider this proposal represents a good example of site optimization. You'll see there are a number of concerns regarding overlooking from the proposals. And again, if you look at the annotation on the drawings, where I'm just circling the hand here and over here, that obscured glazing is either proposed or it would be obscured glazing up to 1.7 meters above internal finished floor level. The garden area, which is proposed, more than meets the council's standards for new dwellings. There are 2 parking spaces which can be provided, so arguably the proposals should not add to parking pressure locally. The street is not in a controlled parking zone, but as I said, there's more than adequate space on the site. The designer has annotated it to show a cycle store as well. But as I've said, overall, we feel this is a good example of site optimization, and the scheme is recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. There being no speakers on this application, I'll move straight to questions from members of the committee. I'm not seeing any comments from members of the committee. Councillor Crowe, then Draper. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I can see and totally understand why local residents might prefer this site to be given over to parking, it seems to me that the application before us is for a very acceptable bungalow, so I have no problem with the application at all. I think it's good.
Thank you. Councillor Draper. Nick.
I just got to echo it. It's really lovely.
Councillor, I'm sorry, Southgate.
That's all right, Chair. Yes, I don't know about really lovely, but it's fine. And again, interesting point about public realm. That triangle of rough grass in front has been public realm for some years. So I think it's a 1 meter high fence will be, so in effect that will still be within the public view, as if you like to say, which I think is important.
Okay. There being no other comments, the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to conditions. Can I see all those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Is that up? Yes, 9. My non-vote is again effectively unanimous. That one we have resolved to grant planning permission subject to conditions. The rest of the agenda is agendas item 8, planning appeal decisions, a report to note. Is that noted? Agenda item 9, planning enforcement cases, a report to note. Is that noted? Thank you very much. That concludes this evening's meeting. I will see you all in another